I'm Jack with the Society for Dialectical Rhetoric. As we say, dialogue is the path to liberatory action. And here at the Society for Dialectical Rhetoric, all are welcome to communicate and engage in communicative dialogue that opens our eyes to the community around us as well as the world. So, addressing some of the key features of our nonprofit organization, and yes, it is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, or 3C, whatever. It's a nonprofit committed to fostering this community dialogue and dialectical dialogue. We are committed to instilling the values of ethical dialogue and discourse, as well as integrity in research and rhetorical strategies, which we promote to encourage open and impactful discussion spaces. It shouldn't be taboo to engage in discourse and discussion anywhere. Our purpose: exchange, expression, reflection, education, and liberation. Our vision is to create a global community where critical thinking, ethical dialogue, and self-advocacy are the cornerstones of social interaction. And collective action. We envision a world where individuals are equipped to challenge oppressive systems and contribute to a more just, equitable, and liberated society. The mission of the Society for Dialectical Rhetoric is to foster education and dialogue that empower individuals to critically engage with and transform their social realities. Through the study and practice of dialectical rhetoric and dialogical ethics, we aim to cultivate the skills necessary for effective self-advocacy and societal resistance against authoritarian structures. So, where do we begin? Well, one, you can stop by our website, societyfordialecticalrhetoric.com. You can email us at societyfordialectical.rhetoric@gmail.com, or check out our Instagram at Society for Dialectical Rhetoric. What we do here matters. Every moment we have matters. And if we don't take the critical action now and today to preserve our right and constitutional authority of dialogue, then we will forever be beholden to the powers that be. Now, moving on to the general idea of dialectical rhetoric and some of the key components of this theory, or rather, applications of this theory. So, first, we start with thesis. What happens is we all have opinions, beliefs, ideas that we hold to be true. This is our thesis. Well, what happens when someone stands up and says, "No, I don't agree. Actually, I think we should build a wall," or something belligerent like that? Well, maybe a wall would be the right idea, right? So, no wall. Wall is the antithesis of what we're trying to build. So, what's the synthesis here? The syntheses even here for how we can arrive at a conclusion for the idea of walls, no walls, walls, or syntheses of both? No. Diametrically opposed is not always the exact way of life. Diametrically opposed is the idea that all things can be diametrically different in a sort of binary that tends to trap people in the logic of what am I here to do but consume one choice or the other. So binary thinking gets us stuck in this idea that either we're going to have a wall or no wall. Well, how about some walls? A little messy. Walls and a bridge. Like, there's different components other than these diametrically opposed opposed ideas. There's different components and ideas out there. We could build a wall. We could also build a bridge. We could also build a moat. We could do anything, right? There's so many options out here. There's syntheses of options. But here's the thing, is that there's only going to be an ethical outcome if we look at all parties involved in this decision. And we seek the dialogue necessary, that being through the dialectical rhetoric method. So this method consists of deconstruction. Deconstruction is the idea that all things have structure. Don't know why. But the idea that all things have structure, and what we must do to understand them, is deconstruct. So, we look at the underlying framework of ideas. And what this does for us is bring out the core components of this idea that may be in conflict with each other. And these frameworks tell us and show us these systemic and systematic approaches that bureaucratic organizations take. And what these authoritarian governments do, and authoritarian institutions do, is they try to hide the structure and prevent deconstruction. This is an anti-dialogical method used and employed by many authoritarian organizations. And what we aim to do as a nonprofit dedicated to bringing about dialectical change and transformation through discourse and communication is going to lead us to our next idea. We must identify these components. Identify these components that are working against us. Who's us? Well, I would like to frame us as the Society for Dialectical Rhetoric. We are an organization of people. Anyone can join this organization. It is not closed. It is not secretive. What we are trying to do is open up the transparent boundaries and split them to shatter them. Shatter these one-sided windows, if you will, that block our vision of these corporate entities and conglomerative businesses, and hardly even businesses, conglomerative entities and cannibalistic organizations that feed on the working class. These organizations will not last long. And that is because of a few key components of this idea of identify. Now, we must look at this through the framework of historical materialism. We must be able to understand that the overall problems here come from contention in the productive base and in the base of the economy. The contention comes, and this class conflict actually comes at the cost of the working class, while the rich and bourgeoisie class just keeps getting richer. That's why we must identify both sides that are diametrically opposed and understand where we lose, they win, or where we win and they lose. So, now we're kind of diving into these ideas of thesis and antithesis. Now, let's look at this next idea. Part of the dialectical rhetoric method is employing the tactic of dialogue. How do we do this? 1, by identifying with each other, and 2, talking with each other. We have to talk. It must not be a taboo, like I said earlier, to discuss what is going on around us and what is happening writ large in this world. We must be able to look at the big picture in these discussions, identify what affects us and what affects the people that we are discussing these things with, so that we can better be able to communicate. We can be able to communicate better around these topics and around these social issues that have a large impact. Well, now let's say we're in a discussion and we're having a dialogue with a person, right? Is there a constitutional protection for dialogue? Technically, yes. But as we've seen with more recent authoritarian breaches of our human values, of freedom of speech, and various different things, we can see that these dialogical institutions are starting to become surveilled by the powers that be. They don't want our educational freedom to exceed their authority and hegemony. So, what do we do next? We critique. So we start critiquing this system. And what does that mean? Boo, boo, capitalism, boo. Right? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. We need to critique this system to see where the flaws are. The flaws in authoritarian capitalism and neoliberalism writ large, and the ability of these large conglomerate entities to take what they want at a larger and larger cost to the people is going to result in their inevitable outfall. That's where we come back to historical materialism. We have a critique to look at, a framework to set it in. We can see that as class conflict rises, and as the bourgeoisie class becomes more unregulated, we start to see a breakdown in the social institutions we have. And we start to see a fracturing of the people due to conglomerative corporate entities that are global. These are global institutions. Now, this nonprofit, don't let you forget, I must not let you forget, is a corporation. I'm not trying to hide the strings. All nonprofits in this country are technically a corporation. However, what we do with our money matters. What we do with our transparent ability to show our investors and our members and our people that we matter as a people. Well, there's a few different ways we can do it. First, after we critique, we must juxtapose these systems. Now, what's this confusing word, juxtaposition, that we're using, or juxtapose? What does that mean? I've heard it. I usually hear it when people want to sound fancy. Juxtaposition. It sounds it's a cool word, right? But the important part that we remember is that this whole framework of neoliberal authoritarianism will be erased when we rebuild and juxtapose it competition versus compassion. Oof. How can you have a compassionate competition? Right? How can you have a compassionate competition? Well, now we can arrive at our thesis triangle. have a thesis. This thesis is compassionate, equitable economics. And what this tells me is that there's obviously an antithesis. That antithesis is the idea of cutthroat, competitive, market-oriented economics and politics. So, cutthroat. Let's just go cutthroat. Why? That sounds so black and white, right? Well, that's what we're trying to do. We take the thesis, we go diametrically opposed to it, and then we arrive at synthesis. So, what is the Society for Dialectical Rhetoric trying to achieve with their syntheses? It is praxis. A simple word, a fun word to say, but an even more important word to understand. Praxis is the combination of both action, wow, that's a big topic, and reflection. Because without reflection, we cannot arrive at true praxis and reform. Now, you may be asking me, Jack, how the hell do you know all this? What the fuck is this all about? But I'll tell you, this competition and being cutthroat is about operating in the mode of ignorance. It's ignorant. Why? Do you have to assume that we are all in competition against each other when we all live practically under one roof, if you will? That is the atmosphere. So, what I will say as I conclude is that we must be able to arrive as a society, and this is the entirety of global society, of human networks. We must unite under the idea that we can reform politics as usual and the powers that be to understand that their capital does not outweigh our labor and our culture. We must rise above the idea that we are to be defined by our possessions. Once again, we are the Society for Dialectical Rhetoric. I'm Jack, and I would love to urge you to reach out to the Society for Dialectical Rhetoric and see how you can get involved. There's always somehow, some way that you can get involved, and you can begin to find purpose in your daily action and reflection, and start to see a more unified approach to how we can reform and transform the justice system in this country, as well as every other system that works against the few. Thank you so much for listening and giving me your time for this video. And I would like to add that if you would like to join us, we are building in the Treasure Valley. And you can, once again, email us at societyfordialectical.rhetoric@gmail.com. Now, don't wait. Don't wait around. Get up and act. Act on your heart, not your greed, not your disgusting qualities that only hurt you. I know I feel much better when I act on my heart. I voted today, and I can tell you that I acted on my heart. Did you?